The dealer claimed my friend made $70,000 a year on the finance paperwork, even though his real income was around $14,000. Once I showed the GM the two conflicting applications, they were forced to unwind the deal and replace his car the fast way. Stick around, because today's stories will leave you absolutely speechless. Story 1. I found the dealer's bank fraud and forced them to fix it. It all started around January 2020. My friend made a move that, honestly, didn't have a prayer of working out. He bought a brand new car. With payments that were basically a second mortgage. The numbers were wild. He was making about $10.25 an hour as a shift supervisor, roughly 30 hours a week. That's around $1,200 a month, if everything goes perfectly. Meanwhile, his car payment was about $795 a month, plus insurance around $400. He came to me because I used to sell cars and I knew how these deals actually get put together. I reviewed the paperwork and yeah, the dealer definitely squeezed him with things like overpriced warranties, a higher APR, and add-ons. But here's the annoying part, most of that kind of stuff is legal. It's scummy, but it's not always something you can undo fast. So I went deeper. I looked at the finance application my friend had signed. It listed his real income, the one he actually told the dealer. And that's when the light bulb hit. No bank approves a payment like that for someone making only about $1,200 a month. It doesn't add up. So I dug again and found what the dealership submitted to the bank. And that's where it got ugly. On my friend's application, his income was low, like it should have been. But the version the dealership sent to the bank claimed he was a GM at McDonald's making 70 grand a year. 70 grand. My friend's not a GM. He wasn't even close. And the fact that his credit was good probably helped the bank not question it too hard. That wasn't just overcharging. That was fraud. Bank fraud. Felony territory. I marched into the dealership with my friend and asked to speak to the sales manager. I told him we were going to unwind the deal and get my friend's trade-in back. The manager laughed like I was joking. Then the GM did the same thing. So I didn't argue. I showed them. I laid out the two documents side by side, my friend's signed application and the application the dealer sent to the bank. Then I pointed at the income difference and let the silence do the talking. My friend made around $14,000 a year. The dealer claimed $70,000. I basically told them, this is not a misunderstanding. This is something you don't want to explain to a judge. The GM's face changed immediately. He knew the proof was solid because it was right there in his own paperwork. He finally asked, okay. So what do I do to make this right? I told him the only clean fix was to unwind the deal, cancel the new car deal, and return my friend's trade-in. Unwinding is basically the dealership admitting the transaction gets erased, like it never happened. He tried to dodge it at first, but I stayed firm. I reminded him we could absolutely turn this into a nightmare for them. Not threats for fun. Real consequences. And my friend needed a car immediately because he had to get to work the next day. The GM came back and said they already sold the trade-in. So I said, fine. Then unwind the deal and put my friend into something equal to or better than what he traded. He asked, so you want a similar car? I corrected him, no. You're giving him the same or better, because you already took his trade-in, sold it, and you committed a felony to get him into that mess. This isn't a freebie. This is you correcting your mistake. He was mad, but he also understood the math. If he couldn't fix it properly, we'd move to consumer protection and get a lawyer involved. My friend didn't want that route, but it was the backup plan. Then the GM paused and said, wait. Give me a second. He returned with an offer. He said he had an '08 Civic with about 5,000 more miles, but it was a Civic, not a Focus. He'd unwind the new car deal and put my friend into the Civic at no extra cost. We agreed. The paperwork got drawn up. The old loan was canceled. They took back the newer car, but since it was already titled, they had to sell it as used, which stung their side of the business. And in the end, my friend got a better outcome than the car he traded in. And look, people always ask why we didn't call a lawyer immediately. We could have. But lawyers and court timelines move slow, and we needed results fast. This was the quickest way to force the dealership to fix what they broke. Honestly, the wild part isn't even that the dealer tried to pull a stunt. It's that once they realized we had the documents to prove the fraud, the whole attitude changed overnight. Suddenly, we can't do that turned into signatures, canceled loans, and a car that actually made sense. Story 2, mess with my kids? That physics PhD still can't save you. It all started about a year ago, and honestly, it wasn't even about kids at first. I had this acquaintance, Richard, who's the type that thinks being smart automatically makes him right about everything. He even got his PhD in physics from one of the top universities in our country, like 6 months before all this. So yeah, he's not dumb. He's just painfully convinced he's the smartest person in the room. My wife and I put our kids in Montessori schools, a decision we made together, and we were genuinely happy with it. Richard heard about it and went on a solid 30-minute lecture about how we were wasting money and Montessori doesn't make sense. I tried to be calm. I told him I'd read studies, even had some translated professionally, and I gave real-world examples of people who used similar approaches to learning. And you know what he did? He just wouldn't budge. Not even a little. Anyway, that's just the setup, because Richard has a pattern. He doesn't have any condition like Asperger's or anything. We joke about it all the time. He's just socially oblivious and thinks boundaries are optional. Last week, we were at a group braai for a friend named Jack, who was back home after living overseas. I've known Jack since school, so we brought our families and made it a proper catch-up, not some quick stop and say hi situation. Sometime later in the afternoon, my eldest daughter, Awesome, who's under 10, comes to me looking crushed. She tells me she wants to go home. When I ask what happened, she says Richard spent 15 minutes cornering her and telling her she shouldn't eat hot dogs. He didn't just say it once either. He went deep, explaining what hot dogs are made of and why they're unhealthy. Here's the thing, Awesome isn't a vegetarian, and she's not even pretending to be. She eats beef and chicken like a normal kid. And kids don't want a chemistry lesson while they're holding a hot dog. They want to eat the hot dog. I talked to her, calmed her down, and told her to ignore Richard and go play with her siblings and friends. She got distracted fast, like kids do, so I figured it was done. I didn't want to cause drama with Jack, and I definitely didn't want to make Richard the center of attention. That was my mistake. About half an hour later, I hear Awesome screaming. I run over and there's Richard, right in her face, knocking her hot dog out of her hand and basically acting like he's doing her a favor. My wife took over immediately to handle damage control, and I pulled Richard aside. I told him 3 things, crystal clear. First, you don't talk to someone's kids without permission. Second, you don't teach someone's kids without permission. And third, you sure as hell don't touch a kid without permission. Richard doesn't have kids, so I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Nope. That was still a mistake. Instead of backing off, Richard doubled down. He decided the hot dog issue was his hill to die on, and my kids were apparently the problem. So I shut it down. I told him to stay away from my family. For the rest of the afternoon, I kept my eye on him, and he didn't come near them again. Jack had a great time. We ate good food. End of story, right? Wrong. A few days later, we get a visit from a child protection officer. She claimed we were neglecting our kids, specifically Awesome. She comes in, looks around, and honestly, the house wasn't spotless, but what house with kids is ever spotless? She sits with Awesome, asks a few questions, and leaves. Everything seemed fine. I did the responsible thing. I called a lawyer friend just to be safe. He told me it looked like we were in the clear, but he suggested we stay on top of it. Then I did a little digging, because something didn't feel right. I found out Richard had gotten offended by how I handled him after the hot dog incident. So he filed a false anonymous report. And because Richard is Richard, he wasn't even acting humble about it. He was talking about it like people should be impressed by what he'd done. I needed proof, not just rumors. So I confronted him personally, and I made sure to protect myself. I set my phone to record and went to his house. He doubled down again. He told me we were torturing Awesome. He said he was the one who called child protection. And he even said he'd do it again without hesitation. That recording was gold. I listened to it in my car, forwarded it to my lawyer, and he started working with connections to the public prosecutor to see if we could get Richard in trouble. Justice moves slow sometimes, but the wheels were already turning. Now here's the part where I actually get my revenge. After Richard got his PhD, he bragged about moving into a new flat as soon as he sold his current one. So he renovated. And not in a hire professional's way. He did a lot of the electrical work himself, and that's a huge no-no unless you're properly licensed. I called in an inspector for both his current flat and the new one he was planning to move into. The inspector asked for certification showing who did the electrical work. There was none. And I could already hear Richard's excuses in my head. He's the type who argues that his work is good enough and he shouldn't have to pay someone else. But inspectors don't care about confidence. They care about compliance. So apparently he was forced to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single change he'd made. That means dismantling things, opening up walls, and having everything inspected properly. Then the real punch landed. The buyers of his old flat weren't happy about the delays. And they were even less happy when they found out why the delays happened. They walked away from the deal and took him to court. Since the sale fell through, Richard is stuck paying mortgages on 2 flats. I don't know if he got hit with fines too, but I sure hope he did. Either way, the man who wanted to teach everyone else a lesson ended up paying for his own mess. So yeah, lesson learned the hard way, you don't mess with a man's kids. And if you try to play hero, or play judge, or play investigator when you're not even qualified to touch the situation, don't act shocked when the real consequences show up, one inspection at a time. Story 3, the $400 water heater scam that cost him $15,000. It all started about a year ago, but honestly, the whole thing didn't fully hit my friend until much later. My friend was selling random stuff online, and one of the items was a water heater. You know, the kind you see in community halls and church kitchens, not some fancy home unit. It was working, and he listed it for $150. That's when a landscaping business guy messaged him like he was doing a quick pickup deal. He offered $100 cash today, right there, no drama, so my friend said sure and got it done. Then about 2 weeks later, my friend gets an email saying, actually, it doesn't work. No proof, no nothing. My friend immediately offered a refund or to cover repairs, as long as the repair bill was under $100. The landscaping owner didn't take the deal. Instead, he sent an invoice for $400 and claimed the repairs were already done, and if my friend didn't pay within 48 hours he'd send a debt collector after him. So yeah, my friend paid. Because when someone threatens debt collectors, your stomach drops even if you feel like you're being played. After payment, my friend emailed the confirmation like, okay, done. The guy replied with this smug line about how this is the price you sometimes pay when selling second-hand electronics, basically acting like my friend should have expected it. He even ended the email with a little smiley face. My friend was furious, but then COVID hit and life got loud. He had other priorities, so the whole thing got pushed aside. 18 months later, he's at a bar, and he overhears 2 people talking. A girl is telling a story about her boss, the same landscaping guy, and how he screwed over someone else with a water heater. My friend couldn't believe it. He asked to join the table, and the details were wild. The boss allegedly bought a busted water heater for $25, bought a working one for $100, then billed the seller for repairs on the busted one and sold the working one off to a community group for $300. And here's the part that made my friend's blood run cold. The company name, she said, was the same one tied to the email invoice from the guy who'd swindled him. In other words, my friend wasn't the only target. He was just the first one who had the bad luck of paying. Fast forward again. My friend is overseas, but he still checks listings, and eventually he spots landscaping gear on the same site. Shovels, wheelbarrows, lights, tools, even construction supplies. Then he sees a generator being sold by that same firm. In his area, if you're selling a generator, you need a warrant of fitness. It's basically proof the thing is safe and roadworthy, no exposed wires, no sketchy repairs, no nonsense. Most people ignore it, but if you report it and the court gets involved, the seller can get hit with fines and forced refunds. My friend looks at the generator and immediately knows it's not legit. Just by sight, he says there's no way it would pass a warrant of fitness. So he and his flatmate decide to go in together, splitting the cost 50-50. They meet the owner to pick it up, and when the guy shows up, it's exactly what you'd expect: old, grumpy, and yelling at employees even when nobody asked. The storage unit is emptied out, and it's all as is, no refund. They show him the transfer confirmation, pay $800 total, and take the generator. No warrant of fitness provided. Then they bring it to an electrician friend. He checks it and basically says, buying a new one would be cheaper. This one shouldn't have been sold. It should have been scrapped. They also find something extra sketchy. The main identifier number on the generator had been scratched off, but another number that's usually recorded for tracking was still there. So they contact the seller and tell him the repair estimate is around $5,000. He refuses, because of course he does. He repeats the same line, as it is, no refund. Then they ask for the warrant of fitness. Silence. They follow up again. Still nothing. They ask again and finally get an email saying he'll take it back for $800. They say no. They want the warrant of fitness and they want the problem fixed the right way. They email him every day for 2 weeks and get nothing back. So they do what a lot of people only think about but never follow through on. They print the original listing, report the seller to the website, and then report it to the government. 4 months later, it's court time. And the landscaping owner tries to play it cool. He walks up and says he'll refund them the $800, and they should just tell the judge they got refunded and have the whole thing dropped. My friend says no. So they go into the courtroom, and it ends fast. The government inspector says the generator was in poor condition, highly unsafe, and that it shouldn't have been sold at all. They also find out the owner tried to get a warrant of fitness back in early 2021, but was told the generator needed repair or scrapping, not selling. And they identified the unit using the second number that matched what they recorded earlier. The judge orders the landscaping owner to refund the flatmate the $800, pay the $5,000 repair costs, and then pay a $10,000 fine directly to the flatmate as the affected party. When they leave, the owner is furious. He's basically yelling that he can't believe how much he's being forced to pay, like he thinks the universe owes him an apology. And that's when my friend hits him with the final punchline. Remember the water heater? The guy looks confused, like he's trying to remember every scam he's ever pulled. My friend continues, remember the one you bought for $100 and then invoiced me for $400? I sold it to you, and I know you repaired a different one and invoiced me for that. Then my friend delivers the line that makes the whole story click into place. It's a bitch when what goes around comes around, especially when it accumulates interest. He tells him, you've got 48 hours to pay, or they'll contact a debt collector. And the best part? The owner pays the full $15,000 2 days later. My friend and his flatmate split the $10,000 fine 50-50, and they used it for rent and study stuff like responsible adults who just got justice. They also had the generator repaired and got a proper warrant of fitness before selling it again, this time for $1,000 with the identifier properly handled. Then they went out for a proper dinner and a night on the town, because after that kind of courtroom win, you earn the celebration. Honestly, the craziest part isn't that he got caught. It's that he tried to scam someone with the same exact pattern again, and this time the victim had receipts, patience, and a plan. Story 4, 2 years later, the daddy's boy finally paid. It all started about 2 years ago. I pulled into a busy parking lot with my wife and the kids, and sure enough, it looked like there was only one spot left. Then I noticed something wild. A BMW was towed up front, and the remaining space was basically a puzzle box. I asked the attendant what was going on, and she told me the system automatically assigns spots based on capacity. I figured, okay, I'll just do it carefully. I eased in and parked so close to the other car that I could barely open my driver door, so I had to climb out through the passenger side. When it was time to leave, the BMW was gone. But my car? My tires were trashed. 2 of them were completely flat, like somebody had done it on purpose and with no hesitation. I flagged down the attendant right away and showed her the damage. She called her manager, and the manager promised someone would come within the hour. My wife and the kids ended up taking a taxi home while I stayed behind, furious, because this wasn't some accident. Then I did something that felt petty at the time, but honestly saved me later. I called the police and demanded the parking lot's video. The manager tried to talk me out of it, basically saying they'd hand over footage without going through official channels, but I wasn't letting it slide. Once I filed the complaint properly, everything shifted fast. The manager had me contact their legal department, and the whole thing kicked into a formal process. A mechanic showed up shortly after, aired up my tires, and I finally got to go home, but the real fight was just beginning. I had to chase that parking company for months. For almost 3 straight months, they kept sending the police video, and every time it was wrong. First it was the wrong camera. Then it was the right camera, but the timestamps were off. It took until I got the complete, correct footage before the case could actually move. Once the full video landed, I amended my complaint and went for the clearest description possible. The footage showed the whole thing. The guy walked up, looked at my car like he was looking for a reason to be mad, made angry gestures, then pulled out his own car and came back to finish the job by deflating my tires. You could even see his plate. After that, the next phase was legal paperwork and pressure. I got an invitation for arbitration, and I refused. I told them, no, this is going through the courts. I even added the arbitration offer to my official complaint, so there was no confusion about what they were trying to do. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer who basically acted like this was all a misunderstanding. The message was clear: the daddy's boy was upset, he made a mistake, and I should be reasonable. They offered me a few thousand souls to drop it, and they tried to frame it like I was the unreasonable one. I shut it down completely. I told them no, don't contact me again, and I wanted the case to keep going exactly as filed. Then it dragged on for months. Every couple of months, different lawyers called with fresh settlement offers, and every time I responded by updating the case record so the court could see the pattern. The court date finally arrived, and it was surreal. He showed up with his father, and both of them had their lawyer. I came with mine. They made one last push to settle, but I refused again. The case didn't take long after that, because the video was brutal for them. The judge basically didn't have to guess. The ruling came back as vandalism, and the penalty was split into a fine plus home arrest. The math worked out to about $1,700 in fines, plus 90 days of home arrest. They appealed, but it got tossed. And just last week, I got the final word that the verdict was locked in for good. The deadline for payment was set for October 10th, and if they missed it, the home arrest would turn into jail time. So yesterday, I got the call and they asked for my bank details. Today the transfer hit. Monday I'm reporting payment received, and that's it. 2 years of chasing the truth, dragging the footage out of them, and refusing to be bullied into dropping it. And to Martine, if you're listening, enjoy the home arrest. Also, I hope your school realizes that I was stuck at home with a criminal case isn't a valid excuse for missing credits. Maybe next time you feel like messing with someone's stuff, you'll think twice before letting daddy's money cover your attitude. Story 5. She tried to erase evidence, then promoted herself into a disaster. It all started about a year ago when I was building an online training module for our finance department. The whole point was simple: teach existing users a new process with interactive steps, quizzes, and a few practice scenarios so they could actually learn it, not just click through it. Then a new associate director rolled in. From the outside, she looked like the kind of person who got promoted fast because she was so effective, but the vibe was off. Every time something went wrong, someone else seemed to get blamed, and somehow she always ended up looking clean. It was uncanny, like she was allergic to consequences. After my first draft went out for testing, she tore it apart. Not with normal feedback either. She said it was confusing, demanded more detail than we needed, and questioned basically every single mouse click in the sample scenarios. And here's the kicker: this module was meant for people who already had finance training and knew our internal software. So I pushed back, calmly, over and over, explaining that the content was targeted, the level was appropriate, and the goal wasn't to rewrite the universe. She didn't care. She kept insisting it was impossible to follow, like I had designed it for people who'd never touched a spreadsheet. That meant I had to go back to the subject matter experts and send them her feedback, which was around 20 pages of criticism. At first they thought I was messing with them. I had to forward her email thread before they believed me. For the next 2 weeks, we went through everything line by line. And not just the actual training content either. We ended up recovering things that had already been taught in their 3-week classroom sessions, like how to set up network drives in Outlook. I'm talking basic stuff. Like, if you don't know how to set up your email signature, click here. That wasn't training in the new process. That was babysitting. And the time sink was brutal. I had to rewrite sections, redo voice recordings, and redo approvals. Voice work is never one perfect take, by the way. It's always a mess of retakes and re-recording until your throat feels like sandpaper. When it was finally ready, I sent it back out for review. Then the associate director just stopped responding. No notes. No approval. Nothing. A week later, the finance director asked why the module was almost a month overdue. So I went to pull up her email from the approval process, and I couldn't find it. I have a reputation for hoarding emails, so this was weird. I checked with one of the subject matter experts I've been working with. He couldn't find it either. Then we realized it wasn't just one message. The whole thread was gone. That's when I called in a friend on the IT side. After some detective work, he found out that about a week earlier, someone ran a compliance delete on the Exchange server. Basically a find and destroy tool that wipes messages matching a certain phrase. And the phrase? Something she had used in her email when she was complaining. So not only did the approval trail vanish, but any email containing that wording was wiped from multiple folders. Inbox. Sent items. Deleted items. All of it. Most people use compliance deletes to nuke spam or phishing. This looked like someone trying to scrub evidence of bad decisions. So I started digging. I opened Outlook and searched for anything that could support what I'd done. But everything that mattered was already getting cleaned out. My IT friend, though, could smell a juicy story from a mile away. He recovered the deleted emails and told me to grab them immediately. I saved copies to a flash drive, then for the next few days, every time an email showed up with her name on it, even if it seemed unrelated, I saved it too. We built an offline evidence locker without making any sudden moves. I didn't want to blow the lid yet. I kept telling myself maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. I'm not God. I don't get to see inside everyone's head. Then, weeks after all that, she finally published the module and sent it to the finance director for approval. And that's when reality hit like a brick. The course was supposed to be about 30 minutes. It was now 3 hours. It had multiple unnecessary rabbit holes labeled critical supporting information, even though none of it was connected to the new process. It was like telling someone to learn new CPT codes and then forcing them to also learn how to read the entire dictionary first, just in case. The finance director didn't buy it. He was shocked, honestly, that this rambling mess came from me, especially because I'd been the one building the original draft. So he called a meeting with me and the associate director on Tuesday. The second it started, she tried to distance herself from everything. She claimed she only made a couple suggestions, and somehow I went way overboard. She even tried to suggest I must have used a different version than the one she approved, and that I swapped it after. That isn't how the system works. If you change the approved draft, it doesn't magically become the approved final. It gets kicked back into draft status and gets flagged. It's not a movie. It's corporate software. She kept talking over me while I tried to defend myself. But credit where it's due, the finance director finally muted her so I could explain. Then I did the simplest thing possible. I shared my screen, plugged in the flash drive, and pulled up the recovered email exchanges. Every time she complained about the module, I showed the message where she demanded the exact changes that ended up inflating the course into a 3-hour nightmare. She abruptly left the meeting and went offline. The finance director asked me to send him copies of the relevant files. I did, and I also told him what I'd learned about the compliance delete. He said he'd look into it. And that's when the situation exploded. She never logged back in. Then came a massive internal audit. People from her previous departments were asked to provide statements. Leadership tried to keep it quiet, but big messes don't stay hidden forever. I never got the full details, but it was reported that she and one of the IT managers left the company. The official phrasing was basically they left to pursue the next stage of their careers, the kind of polite cover story companies use when the truth would be too messy. Then the rumor mill did what rumor mills do. Over the next few days, it came out that she and that IT manager were having an affair. And when I checked court records later, both of their divorces had been filed by their spouses. So yeah. I ended up with a void in leadership on my team and a shakedown happening across IT, with information security checking for other leaks. When I reflect on it, my best guess is this: she wanted a big, flashy grand entrance by launching what she thought would be an impressive, comprehensive training module, covering every possible scenario and every possible detail anyone could ever want. But once she realized it was becoming wasteful, rambling, and obviously unnecessary, she panicked. She tried to erase the evidence and pin the nonsense on me to save face. And the wild part is, the cover-up didn't just fail. It set everything in motion. By wiping messages, she accidentally pulled the thread that unraveled the whole situation, including whatever was going on behind the scenes with that IT manager. She tried to throw me under the bus. But instead, she ran herself over. That's all for today. Which story was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video for more insane stories from DT Audio.